Hi, welcome to Infinite Wisdom, where we talk all things afterlife. I'm Susan Grau, your host. I'm so glad you're here. Today, I'm going to talk to you about loss and grief. And boy, I've had a lot of it. So let's take a deep dive. Grief is a monster. It is in control. It decides when it's done with you. You do not decide when you're done with it. And I'll explain that a little bit later. But I want you to remember that grief is in charge and grief has its own mechanism, its own pathway for us to heal. So when I was a little girl, I had a lot of things happen to me that weren't necessarily the best of things. And I remember a lot of sexual abuse and a lot of emotional abuse outside of my home. And my mom and dad were from small town Iowa, and they couldn't imagine, that someone would abuse a child. And we were basically, some of the kids in the neighborhood were basically trafficked through the neighborhood with pornographers. And so that was my beginning of life, really understanding life. I was about 4 years old when that started. I don't even know, 3 or 4. And then at 4.5 years old, I was locked in the unplugged freezer. So most of you know that story. And if you don't, get my book, Infinite Life, Infinite Lessons, because it talks all about that. And it's pretty amazing. It's on pre-order right now, and you get to have 13 Zooms with me. Thought I'd just throw that out there. I never throw it out there. So I hope you pre-order it and come into my Zooms once a month for 13 months to go over the chapters. Anyway, fast forward, locked in the unplugged freezer in the garage, which was a traumatic event for me, but a beautiful one. Went through my life journey, seeing spirits, so I didn't fit in, so I was bullied. And I had a very difficult time understanding death, to be honest with you, because I could see the spirits. And so I didn't quite understand what was happening at a young age. Fast forward to young adulthood. And I had these losses like all of us have. We lose a friend, maybe get a divorce, at an early age. We meet our soulmate, we do life, all those things. And I was about 27 years old. And I got a call from a friend, and she told me that my brother had died. Now, prior to that happening, my brother was coming and visiting me, and I could hear him calling my name. He called it, he would go, Suzanne. That's what he'd do. And I heard that. And I remember running up the stairs and jumping into bed and throwing the blankets over my head and saying, oh my God, go away. I didn't know what it was. And I was a young woman. And then the next night, I saw him standing next to my bed, but I wasn't sure it was him. And he said to me, and I said, go away. I didn't even hear the rest. Go away, go away. And he went away. Night 3, he's at the end of my bed, which felt much safer to me. And I said, Terry? And I recognized that my brother was in spirit, but I still couldn't conceptualize that he had died. And he pulled me out of my body, and I got to see the afterlife once again, which is a whole new story that I'll be sharing on a podcast because it's long. But that was my first intensive loss. My brother died from suicide. And the next morning I got the call. And even though I had seen him, I was so devastated because I was his caretaker. My brother had schizophrenia, and he talked to spirits when we were little. And he had a very powerful, powerful gift. And it overtook him for more ways than one. He had a bad encounter in college. So at the end of the day, I went into terrible grief, and I had to tell my mother that her baby was dead. And my mother had this gift, so she understood the afterlife, but I, as you, am human, and I want my loved ones next to me physically, and I grieve them just as deeply as you grieve yours. And I know that people think that we can just see them so easily, but it's not that easily. And we don't always trust that we're seeing them because we know everything about them, right? And so I know how you feel. So when you come to me, I understand how you feel. So we were working through that loss. And it was devastating. I missed him so much because I took care of him. He lived with me. And I felt responsible. I felt like I should have done it differently, that I should have said the right things, or I should have anything. I should have done something. And every single thing, everything that I ever said to him that wasn't kind, like he used to go into the laundry room and he'd take the laundry out and he'd transfer mine, put mine up on top of the laundry, and then he'd do his, and then he wouldn't put mine back in the dryer. So it would get wet and stinky because it was in the garage. And I would be so angry and I'd yell at him, Terry, you have to remember, and I mean, that's my yelling, but I felt so guilty. I felt guilty for every time I didn't have patience. I felt guilty for every time I thought in my head he'd be happier if he wasn't here because of his sickness. Every single time that I felt, oh my God, I have to do this again, my guilt was overwhelming. So I understand your guilt if you have it. Suicide's an animal by itself. It's a different kind of grief because our heart says they left me on purpose. They left me on purpose. And in truth, they're not thinking about us. They're not in their right mind. They're somewhere else. They just want to rid themselves of the pain. But what I know about suicide is the pain doesn't go with them, but it does transfer onto others. So I was carrying his pain, the pain of his death and the loss of him. So time went on and I started to heal that. And 3 years later, my brother tried to get sober and clean, and I took him to a facility. And I dropped him off and I said, please help him. And he left, did the program. I think it was his second or third time, and he left. Now, this brother had tried to kill himself 4 times. It just wouldn't happen. I mean, things like he would shoot himself and go off a cliff in the car because he pressed the gas and flip over and get up and walk away. He had a lot of pain. So he decided that he was going to leave this planet and nothing was going to stop him. So he tried again and it didn't work. And I won't go into detail because it's gut-wrenching, but it didn't work. So he made a decision he was going to figure out how to make this happen. And he did. He finally won the battle. And I really believe that Spirit tried to stop this from happening because 4 times, and he was serious. These were serious things he did. He should not have survived, but he did. And I remember getting the call, and I knew that this was going to be really rough. And all the loss from my first brother came flooding back. And it just laid on top of me. Every trauma, every pain just laid on top of me. And yet I thrived. I worked through my grief. I moved forward and I made better of it. Now, there's different kinds of grief. I went through a divorce when I was young, and he was my childhood sweetheart. And he went the wrong direction, and I had to let go of him. And it was extremely painful, by the way. And there's losses like losing a friend. Maybe they don't want to be your friend anymore. I had infertility. That was a tremendous loss for me. And so there's different losses that we go through. And I think we grieve from the moment we're born. Our mom takes our blankie away, we grieve. Our mom takes our pencil away, we grieve. Our mom tells us we can't play with our crayons, we grieve, and so on. And it goes throughout our journey. However, some griefs we're just simply not prepared for, no matter how much we've gone through the grief process in life. And this one was another very dark, painful place for me. And even though my brother kept trying to come to me and tell me that he was okay, I couldn't even connect in. So fast forward a little bit. Now, just to clarify, my brother had lost his wife that he loved very much. And she had died of brain cancer, and she was one of my close friends 5 or 6 years prior to this happening. And he had children. And all I could think of is what's going to happen to them. And so all of us, including a stepmother, because my brother remarried, stepped in and tried to help them. So As time went on through my journey, I did the grief thing, and I really thought I dealt with it. I truly believed I dealt with this grief and I'm better and I'm well and everything is going to be okay. But every once in a while it would creep in. I'd be in the grocery store picking out a can of corn, and all of a sudden I burst into tears. And I would think this wonderful person's not on this planet and everyone is moving around like it didn't happen. This horrible thing didn't happen. And I wanted the world to stop and pay attention to this horrible, horrible loss. Someone wonderful isn't on the planet anymore, but they weren't. And I would just stand there and I was humiliated and embarrassed, but that's grief. Grief is in the corner doing push-ups. Trust me when I tell you, if you don't deal with it, it will be in the corner doing push-ups, just waiting for you to have a weak moment. And then it steps in and it comes full force. And that was how I lived my life. So I adopted my children. I was so happy. And then one moment would go by and boom, another grief. And this was just a cyclical thing in my life. And I thought, what am I going to do with all this? How am I going to heal all this, number one? And what am I going to do with it? Well, we all know what I'm doing with it. I'm a medium and I help people heal, and I'm a grief and addiction therapist. So there you have it. And there isn't a lot you can talk to me about that I haven't been through. And that's okay today. I'm a better person because of it, not in spite of it. In spite of is such a negative connotation. And so I decide that because of it, I'm a better person. So we fast forward and my beautiful father gets pancreatic cancer. And I worked at hospice and I decided I was going to take care of him. And I did. And I watched this man slowly disappear, which was another gut-wrenching grief. But I have to tell you, I sat there and prayed that they would take him because I knew the pain he was in. But I wasn't relieved when they did. I actually felt guilt for thinking that. Like I didn't realize what it would feel like because now it's a different person and we all grieve differently for different people. And this was my daddy. So I had to go through that grief again. And, this is life on life's terms. That's how I look at it. And I asked Spirit, why? Why do we have to go through these terrible experiences? Why do we have to have this kind of grief? Why can't we know they're there? And what they shared with me is that if you knew they were there, you wouldn't stay where you are. People ask me why when they go to bed, they can't dream about them. And I tell them, if every time you went to bed, you dreamed about them, you would never get out of bed. And that's just a truth. So we do have bodies that are weak and they age and we leave so that new souls can generate, just like the circle of life. But it seems unfair, I know. Once we recognize that they're with us, it isn't nearly as painful. However, we still have to do the human grief. So fast forward, going through life, doing the ups and downs. Things aren't going well, they're going well. They're not going well, they're going well. Just life on life's terms. And I get a call and I get told that my mother has been resuscitated from an attempted suicide. And I have to tell you, my soul went dark. I don't know how else to say it. I dropped to my knees. Every single thing I had ever gone through in my life came on top of me like a whirlwind, and it took me over. And I remember rocking myself saying, I love you more than anything. I love you more than anything. I love you more than anything, over and over again, just to survive that moment. And I went to the hospital and I had to unplug my mom. And that was an extremely scary decision. And when I did, she took a breath, but her organs were extremely damaged. So ultimately she ended at my hospice. I stayed with her every day, 24/7. I slept with her. My sister and I were there when she left. And that was my mama. And having her leave was so terribly painful. I didn't see my mom for almost 8 years. And the reason I didn't see my mom was because it was too painful for me. And every time I started to feel her, I'd say, go away, go away, go away. I can't do this. I can't do this. I was so overwhelmed and traumatized by another suicide that I could not connect with her. I would not. So the way that I ended up connecting with my mom was a client who's extremely gifted came to me and said, "Hey, your mom's coming to me in dreams, and this is what she's telling me." And I knew it was my mom because of some of the words she used that only my mom would use, truly. And I was just so happy that she spoke to me that I opened up the door. But during the time between those 8 years and my mom's death, I fought to help others heal. I fought to heal myself. I fought for survival. I didn't know if I would ever be the same. And the answer is no. I will never be the same. I can be better. I can be different, but I will never be the same. Those suicides, those losses changed me. And when they first changed me, I thought for sure they changed me for the worse and nothing was ever going to get better. But in truth, I made the decision somehow to change for the better. And I became an even better healer, more to offer, more understanding of grief and loss. It became so important to me that I couldn't harm another human being. And I became fully understood, I guess. I needed to understand me, and I began to understand me and my life journey. Now, my mom was sick. She had Parkinson's and she was getting Lewy body dementia, but she wasn't gone yet and she didn't have it bad. It was the beginning stages. So I couldn't get my mind around that my mom would do what my brothers did, knowing how we responded to that. Today, I understand. She wanted out of her pain. She needed to be out of her pain. Do I subscribe to suicide? No. What you get to relieve yourself of, your loved ones carry. So all that pain, all that agony, all that guilt, all that shame comes onto us. And now we have to resolve it. We have to walk through it. And so, no, I don't subscribe to it. Do I think assisted suicide is a good, positive way? Yes. When someone is very sick because they say goodbye to their loved ones, everyone knows what's happening. They're not leaving just boom, they're gone. It's a different kind of loss, as is every loss. My father's loss wasn't nearly as hard for me because I wasn't angry at him. I was angry at my brothers for causing this pain. I was angry at my mom, and I didn't know how to resolve those angers. And it was okay that I was angry. And if you're angry and you've lost a loved one, it's okay that you're angry. Let yourself feel your feelings. Every feeling you have is a necessary feeling in order to move through it. And believe me when I say, it's not just moving through it, it's moving through you. It is in charge. And when I tell you it's in the corner doing push-ups, I mean it, because when my mother passed away, I will tell you that every single loss I had was like so strong and it had so much strength that I was like a bodybuilder. And it hit me like a lead brick. It was like boulders falling on top of me. And I know that for you who have lost your children or your loved ones, that's how you feel. Like there's boulders on top of you and you're sledging through mud. It's like you're in quicksand and your feet won't go and your legs won't move. And every time you try to move, you sink further. I want you to know that that is part of the grieving process, but that will change as time goes on and you will pull one leg out. And then pretty soon you pull another leg out. And then you're able to wiggle out of that quicksand. And even though still heavy-legged, walk one step in front of you, one right thing at a time. So what I learned to do was do the next right thing. So if that means, if you're in this deep, dark grief, if that means that you get up and brush your teeth, get up and brush your teeth. If it means you scrub the toilet, scrub the toilet. If it means you do your dish, do your dish. Get up and move. Movement is one of the best ways to work through grief. And it will be painful and it will seem like there's no reason. Why? They left me. They're not here. I don't want to live. That's what we feel. But I have something to tell you from all the grief I've been through, because there's more, which I just don't need to share. You do have reason to live. One, your loved one wants to communicate and see the world through your eyes. They want to be there and let you know that there's life after. 2, your soul has more work to do or you wouldn't be here. Do the work here. 3, your life is valuable. This isn't a dress rehearsal. Value your life, even in your pain. And I don't say this easily, coming from someone with grief. I do not say this easily, but value your life because you were given this life to learn and grow and expand your soul. And grief is a major expansion, I will tell you that. So I'm going to ask you to continue moving forward. If I can do it, you can do it. If I can survive those losses and many more, you can survive your loss. And all you have to do is the next right thing. So if you're in bed right now listening to this podcast, get up and go brush your teeth. Get up and get some soup. Make a call. There's someone on the other end wanting to talk to you. Make a call. Now, one of the things I felt when we had suicides was, and with any grief, this happens. Everyone pulled away. Everybody was there. It was hustle and bustle. They cared, they gave love, and then they weren't there. And I didn't know what happened. My life had changed so dramatically, and then everyone disappeared. People don't know how to handle their worst nightmare, and suicide definitely is their worst nightmare. It's the thing they fear the most with their children or their loved ones. Also, I used to think people, well, let me touch on that one more minute. So I'm asking you, if you know someone who's had a loss, please call them. They want to talk about their loved ones. They don't want to pretend they didn't exist. You call and you don't bring them up, and we think bringing them up is going to upset them. No, it gives them the opportunity to emote. Please talk about them. Pick up your phone and call your people that need you. It only takes a moment. Suicide and loss doesn't rub off. We will all experience this during our lifetime. I need you to hear that. So the next time you have someone who's lost someone, please take the next right step and be there for them. Show them love and acceptance. Talk to them. Talk about their loved ones. Let them know that you care and you're not gone. I thought everyone was thinking, what's wrong with her family? Everybody killed themselves. Man, I want to stay away from her. They're all crazy. Nobody was thinking that. I was thinking that. I had put so much burden on myself that I was thinking that. And once I realized that, I was able to let that go and not carry that burden, because everything's a burden. It's like your cup is full and it's running over so fast that you can't even keep the water. You can't even cup it and put it back in. It's so overwhelming, grief. I want you to know, if your loved one committed suicide, that they weren't thinking what this would do to you. They weren't leaving you. They left themselves. And what they were thinking was that they need a reprieve. They wanted out of their pain. That's all. They weren't thinking about what this would do to you or never seeing you again. None of those thoughts were going on. So I do want to share that. I mean, there are instances where there's a few that do it, like I'll show you, but that's very, very unusual and unlikely. Empathic energies are known to want to die. So we need to know how to work with them. And in my book, you'll be able to learn how to work with your empathic child or someone in your world that's an empath, so that they learn to not suck in all the energy around them and carry the load, which is extremely important. We'll have a podcast on empaths, but I'd love for you to get my book because I think it'll help you. So I know there's going to be a lot of questions from this podcast. And don't forget that I have, let me see, it's called SpeakPipe on my website, susangrau.com. And you can press the button and record for 90 seconds and ask a question, and I will answer it in future podcasts. So be sure to come back. Thank you so much for listening to my story and being willing to hear all this difficult agony, all this difficult pain, and know that you will survive, you will thrive, and you will live again. Please remember that. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate you. Remember, they are only a heartbeat away. Take care of you.